The silver hallways of the Orion Spire were always cold. Ji-yoon felt it through the thin soles of her standard-issue shoes. It was a deep cold, the kind that had nothing to do with the temperature. She walked quickly, her head down, her black hair falling like a curtain between her and the rest of the academy. Tall, elegant aliens glided past her. Some had iridescent skin, others had multiple eyes. They paid no attention to the small human girl. To them, she was just another student. To her, she was a ghost. Her room was a small, rectangular space with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a large window that showed the swirling blue and purple colors of the nebula outside. It was supposed to be a place of rest. For Ji-yoon, it was a workshop and a battleground. Her roommate, Soo-min, was already there. She was sitting on her bed, scrolling through a light screen filled with engineering diagrams. Soo-min was practical. She was strong where Ji-yoon was fragile. She saw the world in straight lines and solid facts. When Ji-yoon entered, Soo-min glanced up, her eyes flickering with a quick, unspoken worry. Before she looked back down at her screen, Ji-yoon went straight to her desk. On it lay her project. It was a pair of wings. They were not like the wings of the bird-like Kthar teachers. Those were made of flesh and feather. These were something else. She had built them herself, piece by piece, from parts she found in the recycling bins and the junkyards of the station. The frame was a light, strong metal. Stretched over it was a thin, clear film that looked like plastic but was stronger. Wires as fine as hair ran through it, connecting to a small power source. They were mechanical wings, beautiful and strange. She picked up a tiny tool and started to work. Her hands, which were usually clenched into nervous fists, became steady and sure. She connected a wire. She tightened a joint. This was her secret language. While other students learned about warp drives and plasma cannons, Ji-yoon studied how things flew. She studied the way energy moved through living systems. Her wings were her dream. They were her way of saying that humans, who were born on the ground, could learn to touch the sky. Soo-min watched from her bed. She saw the focus on Ji-yoon's face. She saw the way her eyes lit up when a tiny light on the wing's control box glowed to life. Soo-min felt a heavy feeling in her stomach. She liked Ji-yoon. She thought the wings were amazing, but she also knew what was going to happen. She had seen it before. "You should put that away," Soo-min said softly. Her voice was almost a whisper. Ji-yoon didn't look up. "I just need to fix this last connection. The neural link is almost stable." "It's almost morning," Soo-min said, her voice a little tighter. She wasn't angry at Ji-yoon. She was afraid for her. Before Ji-yoon could answer, the door to their room slid open with a quiet hiss. They didn't need to look to know who it was. Haiju stood in the doorway. She was a tall girl with a sharp face and a permanent smirk. She looked at Ji-yoon, then at the wings on the desk, and her smirk widened. She stepped inside, and behind her came Min-soo. Min-soo was the leader. He was handsome and came from a very rich and powerful family on Earth. Everyone knew his name. He walked with a confidence that took up all the space in the small room. His eyes, cold and clever, landed on the wings. "Still playing with toys, Ji-yoon?" Haiju said, her voice like broken glass. Ji-yoon's hands stopped moving. She slowly put her tool down. She did not look at them. She stared at her wings, as if her stare could protect them. Min-soo walked over to the desk. He didn't touch the wings right away. He circled the desk, looking at them from every angle. "You know," he said, his tone conversational, almost friendly. "It's fascinating. A deep space, faster-than-light academy, and you're trying to invent the bird." He picked up the wings. They were large and delicate in his hands. Ji-yoon flinched, as if he had touched her own skin. "We are humanity's future," Min-soo continued, his voice losing its fake friendliness. "We are here to learn to build empires, to command starships. And you are making this. This is why the other species think we are primitive. This is why they laugh at us." "They don't laugh," Ji-yoon whispered, her voice so quiet it was almost not there. "They do," Min-soo said, leaning closer. "But they laugh at you, not at me. They laugh because you are weak. You cling to childish dreams. We need to be strong. We need to be hard. We don't need wings. He held the central spine of the wings in his two hands. It was the main piece, the backbone of the whole structure. June had spent weeks making it perfect. Please, she whispered. Minsu looked her right in the eyes, and then he snapped it. The sound was sharp and final. It was the sound of a bone breaking. The delicate frame splintered. The fine wires tore. The beautiful wings went limp in his hands, one side hanging at a sick, wrong angle that he dropped them on the desk. The broken pieces clattered against the metal surface. Haiju laughed. A short, ugly sound. Maybe you can build a box to hide in instead. Then they turned and left. The door slid shut behind them. The room was silent. The only sound was the low hum of the station's life support. June did not move. She did not cry. She just looked at the broken pieces of her dream. Her face was empty. It was the look of someone who had been hit so many times that there was no surprise left. Only a deep, tired acceptance. Sumin sat on her bed, her hands clenched into fists on her knees. She had seen it all. She had done nothing. The shame was a hot, sour taste in her mouth. She wanted to say something. She wanted to say, "I'm sorry." She wanted to say, "We can fix them." She wanted to say, "I should have stopped them." But she said nothing. She was afraid. If she stood up for Jiun, Minsu and Haiju would turn on her next. Her life at the academy would become a nightmare. So she stayed quiet. She chose safety over bravery. After a long time, June slowly reached out. Her fingers, trembling now, touched the broken spine of her wings. She picked up the two separate pieces. She looked at the fracture. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she pulled a soldering iron from her drawer. She plugged it in. A tiny orange glow began to heat up at its tip. Sumin finally found her voice. "June, it's broken. Just leave it." June looked up. For a second, her eyes met Sumin's. There was no anger in them. There was no blame. There was only a deep, bottomless sadness, and behind that, a tiny, stubborn spark. "I will fix it," June said, her voice still a whisper, but now it had a thread of steel in it. "I will always fix it." She turned back to her work. The sun cycle for the Orion Spire was beginning, and light from the simulated dawn was starting to fill the room. It illuminated the lonely figure of a girl, already starting to rebuild what had been broken, knowing full well that it would all happen again tomorrow. The days on the Orion Spire began to blend into a single, painful rhythm. For Jiun, life became a cycle of darkness and light, of creation and destruction. The station's artificial sun would set, and the night would become her only friend. While the rest of the student body slept or studied in their well-lit rooms, Jiun's desk was a small island of light in the darkness. Her fingers, small and precise, worked through the night. The broken pieces of her wings were laid out before her like a patient on an operating table. She didn't just repair the snapped spine. She improved it. She found a stronger, more flexible alloy in the scrap depot, smuggling the piece back to her room under her jacket. She spent hours melting and reshaping it, replacing the old backbone with a new, more resilient one. She reinforced the joints where the wings would fold. She rewove the fine, hair-like wires, making the network denser, smarter. Each night was a lesson. Each break showed her a new weakness, and she met it with a new solution. The wings were no longer just a dream. They were a challenge. Puzzle she was determined to solve. The morning, however, always came. With it came the sound of the door sliding open. Sometimes it was Haiju alone. Sometimes Minsu came with his cool, evaluating stare. The method of destruction changed, but the result was always the same point. One morning, Haiju brought a small sonic tool. She didn't even touch the wings. She just pointed the device, and a high-pitched whine filled the room. The clear polymer film of the wings vibrated violently, then developed a web of fine cracks before becoming cloudy and brittle. Haiju then casually tapped them with her foot, and they shattered into 1,000 pieces like sugar glass. Another time, Minsu examined her latest work, a version with a more complex hinge system. He didn't say a word. He just took a heavy textbook on stellar mechanics and brought it down on the central mechanism with a heavy, final thump. The gears and servos inside crumpled into a useless lump of metal. Ji-yoon's reaction never changed. She would stand perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the ruins of her work. She never cried out. She never pleaded. She just absorbed the violence, her face a mask of quiet endurance. This silence seemed to anger Min-soo more than any protest would have. It was as if she was refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "You are like a little insect," he told her one morning, after crushing a newly crafted wing strut under his heel. "You just keep crawling back. Don't you understand? You don't belong here. Your stubbornness is an embarrassment." Ji-yoon said nothing. She simply waited for him to leave before she began picking up the pieces. The other students in their corridor saw what was happening. They saw Haiju and Min-soo walking into the human girl's room each morning. They heard the sounds of things breaking. They saw Ji-yoon's hollow eyes in the common room. But no one did anything. A boy named Jae, who shared an engineering class with them, sometimes looked uncomfortable. He would see Ji-yoon sitting alone in the mess hall and think about sitting with her. But then he would see Min-soo laughing with his friends, and the thought would die. It was easier to look away. The law of the schoolyard, it seemed, was the same even among the stars. Do not get involved. Sumin was trapped in the middle of it all. The room she shared with Ji-yoon was no longer a home. It was a crime scene that repeated itself daily. She tried to pretend it wasn't happening. She started waking up earlier and leaving the room before the bullies arrived. She would spend the extra time in the gym or the library, anywhere but there. But she couldn't escape completely. She had to return to the room eventually. She would find Ji-yoon already at work, the floor swept clean of the morning's debris. The new, improved version of the wings taking shape on her desk. One evening, Sumin finally broke the silence between them. Ji-yoon was soldering a new connection, the sharp smell of hot metal filling the air. "Why do you keep doing it, Ji-yoon?" Sumin asked, her voice tired. "You know what they're going to do. You're just giving them a reason to bother you." Ji-yoon paused, the soldering iron hovering in the air. She didn't look at Sumin. "If I stop, then they win," she said simply. "They've already won," Sumin said, her frustration bubbling over. "They break it every day. You can't win. Just stop. Make something else. Something they don't care about." "This is what I want to make," Ji-yoon replied, her voice firm. She finally turned to look at Sumin. Her eyes were dark and serious. "This is important." "It's just wings?" Sumin said, though even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Ji-yoon shook her head slowly. "No, it's not." She turned back to her work, ending the conversation. Sumin felt a surge of anger, but it wasn't directed at Ji-yoon. It was directed at herself. She was being practical. She was being smart. She was surviving. But watching Ji-yoon, night after night, rebuilding what was so cruelly destroyed, made Sumin feel like a coward. Her inaction felt heavy, like a coat she could not take off. The next morning, Sumin did not leave early. She stayed in her bed, pretending to be asleep when the door slid open. She peeked through her barely open eyes. Min-soo was there. He picked up the wings. This time, he didn't break them immediately. He looked at Ji-yoon's latest innovation, a small, self-charging power cell. "You're getting better," he admitted, a hint of mockery in his voice. "I'll give you that. It's a shame your talent is so pointless." Then he opened the small waste disposal chute in the wall and dropped the wings inside. There was a faint grinding sound from deep within the station's recycling system. They were gone forever. That was a new kind of breaking. It wasn't just damage. It was complete erasure. Ji-yoon stared at the empty chute, and for the first time, Sumin saw a crack in her armor. Her lower lip trembled for a single, fleeting second. When the bullies left, Ji-yoon did not immediately go to her desk. She just stood there, looking at the spot where her work had been. Sumin sat up. "Ji-yoon?" she began, her voice thick with a shame she couldn't name. Ji-yoon turned and walked out of the room without a word. She didn't go to class that day. Sumin spent the whole day feeling sick, The image of Ji-yoon's silent, defeated walk burned into her mind. The cycle was continuing, but something was changing. The cracks were starting to show not just in the wings, but in Ji-yoon herself. And Sumin, watching from the sidelines, felt the ground beneath her own feet beginning to feel less and less stable. A notice appeared on all the student light screens. The Orion Spire was holding its annual interspecies engineering exhibition. It was a major event. The best students from every species would showcase their projects. Teachers, visiting scientists, and even officials from the Galactic Concord would be there. For many, it was a chance to be noticed, to earn a prized internship, to bring honor to their family and their world. June read the notice with a flicker of something she had almost forgotten. Hope. This was her chance. This was the reason the wings mattered. It wasn't just a dream. It was a real project with a real purpose. She could show everyone that her work had value. She could prove Minsu wrong. That night, she worked with a new, fierce energy. She had to start from scratch after the waste chute incident, but she had her old designs in her computer. She knew exactly what to build. This would be her masterpiece, the final version. She used every bit of knowledge she had. The wings were larger, more elegant. The frame was a dark, lightweight metal that seemed to absorb the light. The membrane was no longer clear, but had a faint pearlescent sheen, like the inside of a seashell. She integrated a direct neural interface, a headband that would let the wearer control the wings with their thoughts. It was beautiful and advanced. Sumin watched her. She saw the determined fire in Ji-yoon's eyes. For the first time, she felt a little of that hope herself. Maybe this would be the end of it. If Ji-yoon won recognition, if important people saw her work, then Minsu would have to stop. He wouldn't dare bully someone who had the attention of Concord officials. The exhibition felt like a finish line. The day of the exhibition arrived. The main hall of the academy was transformed. Booths were set up in a wide circle. Holograms of complex machinery floated in the air. There was a low hum of conversation in a dozen different languages. Students from insectoid species displayed gravity field generators. A student from an aquatic race demonstrated a personal water reclamation suit. The air was thick with ambition and invention. Ji-yoon's booth was in a corner, but her project stood out. The dark, graceful wings were unfolded on a display stand, catching the light. They looked less like a machine and more like a piece of organic art. A few visitors stopped to look, their multifaceted eyes or single large pupils studying the design with interest. Ji-yoon stood straight, her hands clasped in front of her. She was nervous, but she was also proud. Sumin stood a few feet away, leaning against a pillar. She was there for moral support. She saw Ji-yoon explaining her project to a tall, feathered Kthar official. She saw the official nod slowly, a sign of deep respect among his species. Sumin allowed herself a small smile. It was working. Then she saw Minsu. He was with his group, moving through the crowd. His own project, a compact plasma conduit optimizer, had already been judged. He had received polite applause, but nothing special. His face was a calm mask, but Sumin could see the anger in his eyes. He was scanning the room, and his gaze landed on Ji-yoon's booth. He saw the small crowd gathering. He saw the Kthar official listening intently. His calm mask cracked. He walked towards Ji-yoon's booth, his followers trailing behind him like shadows. The Kthar official, sensing the tension, politely excused himself and moved away. The other onlookers also drifted back. Feeling the change in the air, Ji-yoon's confident posture wilted. The hope in her eyes died, replaced by the old, familiar fear. Minsu didn't even look at her. He walked right up to the display stand and looked at the wings. He didn't touch them. He just studied them with a cold, clinical disgust. The exhibition is to showcase projects that benefit the Concord, Minsu said, his voice loud and clear, cutting through the hum of the hall. People turned to look. Projects that show strength, progress. He turned to face the growing audience. What do these wings do? They mimic a lesser species. They are a tribute to weakness. They are a toy. And this girl, he said, pointing a finger at Ji-yoon without looking at her. wastes her time and academy resources on toys, while the rest of us work to secure humanity's place in the galaxy. June found her voice. It was small, but it was there. It's biomimetic design. It has applications for personal mobility in low gravity. It has no applications, Minsu shouted, turning on her. The hall fell silent. All other conversations stopped. Every eye was on them. It is a useless fantasy, and your stubbornness in clinging to it is a disease. It infects our entire species. It makes us look like children. He turned back to the wings. From his pocket, he took a high-powered magnetic tool. It was a device used for calibrating heavy engine parts. It was not meant for delicate work. This exhibition is for the strong, he said. For the useful. He activated the tool. It glowed with a fierce blue light. He didn't smash the wings. He didn't snap them. He touched the tool to the central power core. There was a sizzling sound. A smell of burnt plastic and ozone filled the air. The beautiful, pearlescent membrane blackened and curled. The dark metal frame glowed red, then white, then began to sag and melt. The neural interface headband sparked and died. Minsu moved the tool slowly, deliberately, ensuring every centimeter was destroyed. He wasn't just breaking it. He was erasing it. He was turning her masterpiece into a smoldering, melted lump of junk that Jiyun could only watch. She didn't move. She didn't make a sound. The light from the melting metal reflected in her wide, unblinking eyes. It was the most complete destruction yet. It was total. When it was over, a twisted, blackened sculpture was all that remained on the stand. Minsu deactivated the tool. The silence in the hall was absolute. He looked at Jiyun, at her utterly broken expression, and he seemed satisfied. The disease has been purged, he said, to no one and everyone. Then he turned and walked away, his group following him. The crowd parted to let him through. The exhibition slowly started back up, the hum of conversation returning, but it was hushed now. People glanced at Jiyun and the ruined wings, then quickly looked away. No one came to her booth. Jiyun stood there for a long time, staring at the wreckage. The hope was gone. The fire was gone. Everything was gone. Sumin pushed herself away from the pillar and walked over. She didn't know what to say. Jiyun, she whispered. June didn't respond. She didn't seem to hear. Slowly, like a robot with failing power, she turned and walked away from the booth. She left the melted remains of her wings right there for everyone to see. She walked out of the hall. Her steps slow and hollow. Sumin followed her back to their room. June did not go to her desk. She did not look at her tools. She walked to the large window and stared out at the nebula. She stood perfectly still, her arms hanging limp at her sides. She was not crying. She was not angry. She was empty. Sumin watched her. The shame she had felt before was nothing compared to what she felt now. She had stood by and done nothing. Again, she had let hope be destroyed in front of everyone. She had watched a spirit be extinguished. This was not just about broken wings anymore. This was about a broken person. And as Sumin looked at her roommates still, silent back, she knew that something inside of her had broken, too. The fear that had held her captive for so long finally snapped. It was replaced by a cold, hard, and very clear thought. This would not happen again. Sumin did not say anything to Jiyun. There were no words that could fix what had happened in the exhibition hall. She just watched as Jiyun stood by the window for a long time, and then, without a word, got into her bed and turned to face the wall. She did not get up for dinner. She did not move when the lights dimmed for the night cycle. The silence in the room was heavier than ever before. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of an ending. But for Sumin, it was a beginning. She sat at her own desk and activated her light screen. The blue glow lit up her face, which was set in hard, determined lines. She was done being afraid. She was done being practical. Minsu had not just broken a project. He had tried to break a person. And he had almost succeeded. Seeing Jiyun's empty stare had ignited a fire in Sumin that she didn't know she had. She was not a biomechanic like Jiyun. She could not build beautiful, flying things. Her talent was different. She understood the hidden strength of things. She knew how materials behaved under stress. She was a genius in material science and energy dynamics. While Jiyoon looked at the wings of a bird, Sumin looked at the shell of a beetle or the structure of a diamond. She studied how to make things strong, how to make them endure. She was not going to build a new pair of wings. She was going to build armor. Her fingers flew across the screen, calling up designs and formulas. She accessed the Academy's advanced material database. She needed something special. She remembered a material she had read about in a theoretical journal. It was a memory molecular alloy. It was incredibly tough, but its real secret was its ability to absorb energy. When hit with a force, it wouldn't just resist. It would soak up the energy like a sponge and store it. Then, it could release that energy back in a controlled way. This was her answer. She would not fight force with force. She would fight force with intelligence. For the next 3 days, Sumin lived in a world of focused silence. She skipped classes. She barely slept. She spent hours in the fabrication lab, using her high-level clearance to work with machines most students weren't allowed to touch. She forged the special alloy, pouring the molten metal into a mold she designed herself. It was not a weapon. It was a skeleton, a thin, lightweight exoframe. The frame was deceptively simple. It was a series of interlocking rods and plates that could be attached to the main structure of Jiyoon's wings. It was designed to be almost invisible, to fit seamlessly over the central spine and the main joints. It didn't look strong. It looked delicate, like a web of gray lace. But its strength was not in thickness. It was in its design. The entire frame was a single, clever system for absorbing and redirecting energy. If someone tried to break it, the frame would take the hit, store the energy, and then, following Sumin's programming, release it all at once back to the point of impact. She worked with a cold, precise fury. Every calculation was checked and double-checked. Every connection was perfect. This was her masterpiece. Not a project for a grade, but a shield for a friend. Meanwhile, Jiyoon moved through the days like a ghost. She went to her classes, but she did not speak. She ate her meals, but she did not taste the food. Her desk remained empty. The bullying had stopped. There was nothing left for Min-soo to break. He had won. He had achieved his goal of crushing her spirit completely. He and Haiju would walk past her in the halls with smug, satisfied smiles, but Jiyoon didn't even seem to see them. On the third night, Sumin's work was finished. She held the completed exoframe in her hands. It was cool and surprisingly light. She took a deep breath and walked over to Jiyoon's side of the room. Jiyoon was sitting on her bed, just staring at the floor. "Jiyoon?" Sumin said. Her voice firm. Jiyoon looked up slowly. Her eyes were dull. Sumin held out the exoframe. "I need your help." Jiyoon looked at the strange, web-like structure. She showed no curiosity, no interest. "It's for the wings," Sumin said. A flicker of pain crossed Jiyoon's face. She shook her head and looked back at the floor. "No more wings." "Yes," Sumin insisted, her voice softening. "There must be more wings, but not like before." She knelt down so she was at eye level with Jiyoon. "They broke your wings every morning to prove they were strong. But they are not strong. They are weak. They are so weak that they need to break you to feel tall." Jiyoon kept her eyes on the floor. "I am not asking you to fight them," Sumin continued. "I am not asking you to be brave. I am just asking you to trust me. One last time. Help me with the final calibration." She held the frame out again. "This is not a dream. This is an answer." For a long moment, Jiyoon did nothing. Then, very slowly, she lifted her head. She looked at Sumin's face, saw the determination there. She looked at the exoframe in her hands. She saw the cleverness in its design, the beauty of its function. The tiniest spark, a single ember left from the fire Min-soo had tried to put out, glowed in the depths of her eyes. She reached out and took the frame. Her fingers, which had been still for days, traced the intricate patterns of the metal. "What does it do?" she whispered. Sumin allowed herself a small, hard smile. "It teaches a lesson." The next morning, the air in the room felt different. It was charged like the moment before a storm. June was already at her desk. The new wings were there. They were not as beautiful as the ones from the exhibition. They were built from spare parts, a simple and functional design. But integrated into their structure was Sumin's exoframe. The gray, web-like metal was almost invisible against the dark wing struts. But it was there, a hidden skeleton of strength. Ji-yoon's hands were steady as she made the final connections. She was not building a dream this time. She was setting a trap built on principle. Sumin sat on her own bed, not pretending to sleep. She was watching the door, her body tense and ready. The door slid open right on schedule. Haiju entered first, her sharp eyes immediately locking onto the new wings on Ji-yoon's desk. A cruel smile spread across her face. "You never learn, do you?" she sneered. Min-soo followed her in. He looked tired, almost bored. The fun had gone out of it for him. Breaking Ji-yoon's spirit had been the real victory. Breaking another pair of wings was just a chore now. "I thought we were done with this," he said with a sigh. He walked towards the desk, his movements lazy. "This is just pathetic now, Ji-yoon. It's like watching a bug that won't stop moving after you've stepped on it." He reached out to grab the central spine of the wings, the same way he had a dozen times before. His fingers closed around the metal, right where Sumin's exoframe was strongest. "This ends today," he said, and he began to twist. The moment he applied force, something happened. The exoframe, which had felt cool and solid, began to hum with a low, deep vibration. A network of fine blue lines glowed to life within the gray metal, tracing the paths of the memory molecular alloy. The energy from his twist was being absorbed, measured, and stored in an instant. Min-soo's eyes widened in surprise. He let go and took a step back. "What is this?"
Ji-yoon låg helt nervosly.
"It's just a stupid light show." Angry now, Min-soo pulled the high-powered magnetic tool from his pocket, the same one he had used to melt the wings at the exhibition. His face was set in a snarl. No more tricks. He activated the tool. The fierce blue light sparked and buzzed. He thrust it directly at the heart of the wings, aiming to burn and melt as he had before. The moment the energy field from the tool touched the exoframe, there was a brilliant, silent flash of blue-white light. It was not an explosion. It was a release. All the kinetic energy from Min-soo's twist, combined with the powerful energy from his own tool, was amplified by the frame and shot back along the path it came from. The mag tool didn't just break. It vibrated in Min-soo's hand so violently that his fingers were forced open. Then the tool itself came apart. The metal casing turned to dust, like sand falling through his fingers. The internal components sparked once and died. The blue light vanished. All that was left was a fine metallic powder drifting to the floor. Min-soo stared at his empty, stinging hand, his face a mask of utter shock and confusion. Haiju gasped. "What did you do?" she shrieked at Ji-yoon. She lunged forward, not at the wings, but at Ji-yoon herself. She reached out to shove her, to finally put her hands on the girl she had tormented for so long. Ji-yoon, acting on instinct, raised her arm. The edge of the wing, sheathed in Sumin's protective frame, gently brushed against Haiju's approaching hands. There was another soft, blue flash. The energy was minimal, just a gentle pushback. But it was enough. It was like Haiju had been hit by a strong, invisible wave. She was thrown backwards, stumbling into the wall with a grunt. She slid to the floor, clutching her wrist, more stunned than hurt. The room was silent. The only sound was Haiju's ragged breathing and the faint, fading hum from the wings. Min-soo looked from his empty hand to Haiju on the floor, to the wings, and finally to Ji-yoon. The boredom was gone, replaced by pure, undiluted fear. He didn't understand what had happened. This wasn't strength. This was something else. Something impossible. It was then that Sumin moved. She stood up from her bed. She didn't walk quickly. She moved with a calm, deliberate slowness that was more terrifying than any shout. She stepped between Ji-yoon and the bullies, turning her back on them as if they were no longer a threat. She looked only at Ji-yoon. "Are you okay?" Sumin asked, her voice quiet but clear. Ji-yoon, who had been holding her breath, nodded slowly. The fear in her eyes was mixing with something new, wonder. Then, Sumin turned to face Minsu and Haiju. Her expression was not angry. It was cold and full of a deep, final disdain. "You broke her wings every morning," Sumin said, her voice cutting through the silence. "You thought it made you strong. You thought it made you tall." She took a single step forward. Minsu flinched and took a step back, hitting the door frame. "But you were wrong," she continued, her eyes locked on his. "You are not strong. You are fragile. You needed to break her to feel tall. You are so weak, so hollow inside, that you need to see someone else break to know that you are still in one piece." She gestured to the wings, which now rested peacefully on the desk, the blue light gone, looking once more like simple metal and polymer. "We don't need to break you to stand tall," Sumin said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow louder than a scream. "We just need to stand." Minsu had no words. His confidence, his power, his entire identity had been shattered not by a fist, but by the simple, unbreakable truth of what she said. He was a scavenger who had lost his prey. He looked at Haiju, still on the floor, and then back at the two girls standing together. He saw the wall of quiet strength in their eyes, a wall he could never climb and could never break, without another word. He turned and fled from the room. Haiju scrambled to her feet and hurried after him, not looking back. The door slid shut. The room was quiet again. But this was a new kind of quiet. It was the quiet after a long storm has finally passed. The air felt clean. Jiun looked at Sumin, and for the first time in a very long time, a real, genuine smile touched her lips. Sumin smiled back. They had not fought with fists or weapons. They had fought with a better idea. And they had won. The news traveled through the Orion Spire faster than a data stream. It did not travel as a loud, dramatic story. It was a quiet whisper, passed between students in the hallways and the mess hall. The story of how Minsu and Haiju had run from the human girl's room. The story of the broken tool and the failed attack. The story of what Sumin had said. The reaction was not cheers or celebration. It was a slow, deep shift. The other students, human and alien, began to look at Jiun and Sumin differently. They did not see victims anymore. They saw two people who had stood their ground in a way no one else had. They saw a different kind of strength. A day after the confrontation, a formal notice appeared on their light screens. They were summoned to the office of Headmaster Kale. Sumin felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. Headmaster Kale was a stern, ancient alien of the Kthar species. He looked like a tall, elegant hawk, with sharp eyes and feathers the color of polished stone. He valued order and discipline above all else. She was sure they were going to be punished for destroying school property, even if it was Minsu's tool. Jiun walked beside her, her head held higher than Sumin had seen in months. She was not afraid. She had already faced the worst. They entered the headmaster's office. It was a large room with a wide window looking out at the stars. Headmaster Kale stood behind his desk, his wings folded tightly behind his back. Minsu and Haiju were already there, standing stiffly to one side. They would not meet the girls' eyes. Headmaster Kale looked at each of them in turn. His gaze was intense and unblinking. "The report states there was an altercation," he began, his voice a dry rustle. "It states that human student Minsu's magnetic calibration tool was destroyed. It states that human student Haiju was physically repelled." He turned his sharp eyes to Sumin. "Your device was the catalyst." Sumin took a deep breath. "Headmaster, they came into our room to destroy Jiun's project. Again, we were only defending her work." Minsu finally spoke, his voice tight. "It was a dangerous, unapproved device. It attacked us." Headmaster Kale held up a long-fingered hand for silence. He looked at Jiun. "And you continued to build this project despite repeated discouragement." Jiun lifted her chin. "Yes, Headmaster. It is a biomimetic study for personal mobility. It is a good project." The headmaster was silent for a long moment. He looked from Minsu's angry, entitled face to Jiun's calm, determined one. He looked at Haiju's shame and Sumin's resolve. Then, he did something unexpected. He gave a slow, clicking sound that was the Kthar equivalent of a thoughtful hum. The Kthar have a saying, he rasped. A predator tests its strength on the strong. It hunts the swift and the clever. This is how the strong become stronger. He turned his gaze to Minsu. But a scavenger only preys on the defenseless. It seeks out the weak and the injured. This does not make it strong. It only reveals its own nature. He walked around his desk to stand before them. You have shown me the difference between true strength and mere cruelty. You, he said, looking at Minsu and Haiju, have shown me the latter. You are both on probation. All your privileges are revoked. You will report for community service duties. Perhaps moving waste recyclers will teach you the value of building things instead of breaking them. Minsu's face went pale. He looked utterly defeated. He and Haiju were quickly dismissed from the office. Headmaster Kale then turned to Jiun and Sumin. Your project, this armor, it is a defensive application? It is, Headmaster, Sumin said. It absorbs energy and returns it. It is not a weapon. A shield is as important as a sword, the headmaster said. Perhaps more so. He looked at Jiun. And you did not stop. That is a quality the Concord needs. Perseverance. He dismissed them without further punishment. The days that followed were different. The shadow that had hung over Jiun was gone. She started to walk through the halls without looking at the floor. She began to speak in her classes again. The other students no longer ignored her. A boy named Jay, who had always looked uncomfortable, actually came up to her and apologized for not speaking up. She just nodded and accepted it. Jiun and Sumin worked together in their room. It was no longer a place of fear, but a workshop of ideas. Jiun with her knowledge of biology and mechanics. Sumin with her genius for materials and energy. They combined their skills. They decided to present their work together at the next science fair. They did not build another pair of wings. They built a demonstration model of the exoframe itself. They showed how it could be used to protect delicate equipment from meteoroid impacts, or to create safety suits for engineers working in dangerous energy fields. It was the principle of the shield applied. They did not win first prize. A student from an insectoid species won for a new type of quantum computer. But they won something else, the award for Most Innovative Application of Cross-Disciplinary Science. When their names were called, they walked up to the stage together. The audience, filled with many of the same people who had watched Jiun's humiliation, applauded. This was not the silence of pity or the murmur of gossip. It was genuine, respectful applause. They stood on the stage, holding the small, glowing award between them. They did not look out at the crowd with triumph. They looked at each other. Jiun was not holding a broken dream. She was holding a future she had built with her friend. Sumin was not holding a weapon of revenge. She was holding a symbol of loyalty. They had not become the most popular students. They had not become powerful. But they had found their place. They had shown that humanity's strength was not in its loudest voices or its cruelest actions. It was in the quiet, stubborn will to create. It was in the courage to protect what you love. It was in the loyalty to stand by a friend when it was hard. They had been broken, and they had rebuilt themselves stronger. And in doing so, they had taught everyone around them what it truly means to be human.